My mother got herself a new husband who already had a son who humiliated me. When they cut me out of the inheritance, I moved out from them. But when I bought a house for $1,500,000, they sued me. My life took a turn for the worse when I was 9. It started the day my mom, Linda, married Richard. At first, I thought it would be nice to have a bigger family. I mean, my dad left when I was 3, and it was just mom and me for years. But Richard came with baggage, a son named Alex, who was the same age as me but seemed to think he was the king of the world. At first, things seemed okay. Richard was polite, and Alex acted friendly. But that didn't last long. Within a few months, the house started to feel like enemy territory. I was the outsider in my own home. Alex had this sneaky way of making everything my fault, and somehow, everyone believed him. If something broke, it was because I touched it. If something was missing, I must have stolen it. And when I tried to defend myself, Richard would lecture me about being a good daughter and respecting my new family. It got worse when Alex started taking my stuff, little things at first. A bracelet my grandma gave me, a book I'd been reading, even my favorite hoodie. He was careful about it too, making sure I couldn't prove anything. When I complained, Mom just told me not to make waves. She didn't want to upset Richard. He's doing his best, she'd say. Alex is just adjusting. Be patient. When my half-brother Noah was born, everything changed. Noah was the child of Mom and Richard, and the whole household revolved around him. I loved him as much as any sibling could, but his arrival left me feeling like I didn't belong anymore. My room, the only space I could call mine, was taken away for the nursery. Instead of moving Alex to make room, they decided I'd be the one to give up my space. I was sent to the basement. It wasn't a cozy basement either. It was cold, smelled like mildew, and had more spiders than I wanted to think about. You're old enough to have your own space, Mom said, trying to make it sound like a good thing. But it didn't feel good. It felt like I was being shoved out of the family. I cried my first night down there. I didn't want Noah to hear, so I buried my face in the pillow, but it didn't help. I couldn't stop thinking about how much had been taken from me. My room, my mom's attention, even my sense of belonging. Things just got worse after that. Every time something went wrong, I was the one blamed for it. One day, a lamp in the living room broke while I was at school, but Richard didn't care about the details. He grounded me for a week, lecturing me about responsibility while Alex stood behind him with a smirk on his face. I started avoiding everyone as much as I could. I'd eat dinner quickly, pretending to be busy with homework so I could escape back to the basement. There were moments when I wanted to tell Mom how bad it was, how isolated I felt, but every time I tried, she brushed it off. She always defended Richard and Alex, telling me to be more understanding. It was like she didn't see how much I was struggling. Or worse, she didn't care. The days turned into months, and I learned to keep my head down. Complaining only made things worse. Alex had a knack for twisting situations to make me look like the villain, and Mom and Richard always took his side. I felt like I was screaming into a void, unheard and invisible. The little things kept piling up. I couldn't leave anything of mine unattended without it disappearing or being messed with. My books were scribbled in, my clothes went missing, and even my school supplies ended up ruined. It was like I wasn't allowed to have anything of my own. When I confronted Alex about it, he laughed in my face, daring me to tell anyone. By the time I turned 13, I was numb to it all. The unfairness, the isolation, the constant blame. It became my normal. But deep down, I knew this wasn't how a family was supposed to be. I just didn't know what to do about it. Growing up in that house felt like a sentence with no end, and by the time I turned 16, I was done pretending things would ever change. Home wasn't home anymore, and the only way I could survive was by staying away as much as possible. I started avoiding the house like it was cursed. Most days after school, I'd go straight to my friend Emily's house. Emily was one of the only people who really understood me. She'd seen firsthand how Alex treated me, and she knew how my mom always turned a blind eye. Her family wasn't perfect either, but her mom, Mrs. Taylor, was warm and kind. She treated me like I was part of their family, even when I didn't feel like I deserved it. I practically lived at their place. Mrs. Taylor would invite me to stay for dinner without even asking, and sometimes she'd leave an extra blanket out on the couch in case I accidentally fell asleep and couldn't make it home. She knew, even though I never said it outright, that I dreaded going back to that basement. When I wasn't at Emily's, I was working. I got my first job at 16 at a little diner called the Silver Spoon. It wasn't glamorous. Half the time I was scrubbing grease off pans or wiping down sticky tables, but it was mine. The tips weren't much, but I saved every dollar I could. At work, I met Jason, the cook who seemed to know how to make the best out of a bad situation. Jason was in his early 20s, and he had this rough-around-the-edges charm. He wasn't just a coworker. He became a big brother figure to me. Jason noticed when I looked upset and always had a way of making me laugh. He'd say, "Kid, don't let them grind you down. One day, you'll be out of there, and none of this will matter." I clung to that idea, that one day I could leave and start fresh. It became my mantra on the worst days. I'd stay late at work, offering to take extra shifts just to avoid going home. The Silver Spoon became my safe haven. At 17, I started planning my escape. I didn't have a specific plan, but I knew I needed to leave as soon as I turned 18. I kept my head down, worked hard, and saved every penny. I didn't even tell Emily or Jason about my plan. The fewer people who knew, the better. Things came to a head one night when Alex crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I'd come home late after a long shift, hoping to sneak into the basement without anyone noticing. When I got there, I found Alex sitting on my bed, rummaging through my things. He had one of my journals open, reading it aloud and laughing to himself. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. He smirked and waved the journal like it was a toy. "Relax, Sarah. What's the big deal? It's not like anyone cares about your whiny little diary." I lunged for it, but he held it out of reach. I was so angry, I didn't even think. I shoved him as hard as I could, and he fell backward, knocking over a box of my stuff. The noise was enough to wake the whole house. Mom and Richard came rushing down the stairs, and of course, Alex spun the story to make me the villain. "She just attacked me for no reason," he said, clutching his arm like I'd broken it. Mom didn't even hesitate. "Sarah, what is wrong with you? Apologize to your brother right now." I couldn't believe it. After everything he'd done, I was the one in trouble. He was going through my stuff. I shouted back. Richard stepped in, his face red with anger. "That's enough. Go to your room." "My room? You mean the basement?" I snapped. "It's not even a room. It's a storage closet." That night, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait until my 18th birthday. I started packing what little I had, stuffing clothes and personal items into a duffel bag. I didn't know where I'd go, but anywhere was better than there. The final blow came the night before my birthday. I'd finally worked up the courage to tell Mom I was leaving. I waited until Richard and Alex were out of the house, hoping for a moment of honesty between us. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm moving out." She looked at me like I just told her I was robbing a bank. "What are you talking about? You're too young to live on your own." "I'm 18 tomorrow. Legally, I can leave." Her expression softened, but only a little. "Sarah, where will you even go? You don't have any money and—" "I've been saving," I interrupted. "I have enough to get started. I'll figure it out." She sighed and sat down, rubbing her temples like she had a headache. "This is because of Alex, isn't it? You're blowing things out of proportion. He's just a kid." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A kid? Mom, he's been tormenting me for years, and you've done nothing about it." "I'm done." For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then she just nodded. "Fine. If you're so determined to leave, I won't stop you. I'll even help you pack." The next morning, she kept her word. She helped me gather my things and even drove me to the bus station. As we loaded my bags into the car, she gave me one last look, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe, or guilt. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah," she said softly. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded and got in the car. As we drove away from the house, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, fear, sadness, and hope. For the first time in years, I was free. But freedom came with its own challenges, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what lay ahead. By the time I hit my 20s, I thought I was done with Richard and his toxic favoritism. I'd worked hard to build a life for myself far from that house. I didn't talk to Richard or Alex unless absolutely necessary, and my relationship with my mom was strained at best. I'd made peace with the fact that I wasn't really part of their family anymore. But what happened with Richards will drag me back into their chaos in a way I never expected. It started with a phone call from my mom. I hadn't heard from her in months, so I was surprised to see her name pop up on my screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hi, Mom," I said cautiously. "Sarah, we need to talk," she began, her voice tense. "Richard's been sorting out his will." I felt a pit form in my stomach. I knew this conversation wasn't going to end well. "Okay," I said slowly. "What does that have to do with me?" Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "He's decided to leave his estate to Alex and Noah. He says they're his biological sons, and I'm not." I finished for her. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to sound calm. "I figured as much. Sarah, please don't take it personally," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's just his decision." I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That I was used to being treated like I didn't matter? That this was just one more reminder that I'd never been part of their family? A few weeks later, I got an invitation to a family dinner. My first instinct was to decline. I hadn't sat at that table in years, and I wasn't eager to start now. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see if Richard had the guts to face me after essentially writing me out of his life. When I arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Richard greeted me with his usual forced politeness, and Alex barely acknowledged me. Noah, now a teenager, was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me. He ran up and hugged me, chattering about school and his soccer team. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. I didn't want to drag him into the mess I had with the rest of the family. Dinner was awkward, to say the least. Richard kept steering the conversation toward Alex's latest achievements and Noah's plans for college, completely ignoring me. I stayed quiet, focusing on my plate, until Richard brought up the will. "I just want to make sure everyone understands," he said, looking pointedly at me. "This decision isn't personal. It's about ensuring my legacy stays within the family." The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't believe he was saying this in front of everyone, like I wasn't even there. "Not personal," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You're literally telling me I'm not part of the family." Richard sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Sarah, you've always gone your own way. You've made it clear you don't want anything to do with us. Maybe that's because you've treated me like an outsider my entire life." I shot back. "But sure, let's pretend this is all my fault." Mom tried to intervene, her voice placating. "Sarah, please." "No, Mom," I said, cutting her off. "You let him treat me like this. You let him push me out, and now you expect me to just sit here and take it?" The room fell silent. For once, even Alex didn't have anything to say. After that dinner, I started hearing stories about Richard's behavior from other people in the family. My Aunt Karen, who'd always been a bit of a black sheep herself, reached out to me. She told me Richard had been pressuring Mom to cut ties with me completely, claiming I was too independent and disrespectful. "Don't let him get to you," Karen said. "He's always been like this, controlling and manipulative. But you're stronger than he gives you credit for." Her words meant more to me than I realized. For the first time, I felt like someone in the family was on my side. Things took a shocking turn when I found out Richard had been keeping secrets of his own. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned that he'd set up a trust fund for Alex years ago, something he never mentioned to anyone else. It wasn't just about favoritism anymore. It was about deception. I confronted Mom about it during one of our rare phone calls. "Did you know about the trust fund?" I asked. She hesitated, which was answer enough. "Sarah, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I snapped. "He's been playing favorites my entire life, and you've let him." For once, she didn't have a comeback. She just sighed and said, "I'm sorry." The final straw came when Richard tried to involve Noah in his schemes. Noah had always been the peacekeeper in the family, but even he couldn't ignore the way Richard treated me. One day, he called me out of the blue. "Sarah, I don't think it's fair what Dad's doing," he said, his voice hesitant but determined. "You're my sister, and you deserve better." His words brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Noah. That means more to me than you know." Hearing that from him gave me the strength to finally confront Richard head-on. I wrote him a letter, laying out everything I'd wanted to say for years. I told him how his favoritism and exclusion had hurt me, how his actions had driven a wedge between me and my mom, and how I was done letting him control my life. I never got a response, but that was okay. Writing the letter wasn't about him. It was about me taking back my power. Life has a strange way of throwing curveballs at you. Just when you think you've figured out your path, something happens that changes everything. For me, that curveball came in the form of an envelope delivered on an otherwise uneventful Tuesday afternoon. I was at home, going through my usual routine of balancing freelance work and job applications. After cutting ties with Richard and Alex, I'd worked hard to build a stable life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Bills were paid, food was on the table, and I didn't owe anyone anything. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from a law firm. "Am I speaking with Sarah Daniels?" the woman on the other end asked. Her voice was calm and professional. "Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Elizabeth Price. I'm an attorney handling the estate of your aunt, Catherine Daniels. I regret to inform you that she passed away last month." The name took me by surprise. Aunt Catherine was a distant relative I barely remembered meeting as a child. She lived out west and kept to herself, never attending family gatherings or keeping in touch. I assumed she didn't care much for family. I didn't even know she was still alive. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, unsure why she was calling me. "She left instructions to contact you directly. You've been named as the primary beneficiary in her will." I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry. What?" "You've inherited the majority of her estate, including a sum of approximately $10 million. My heart stopped. This had to be a mistake. "Are you sure you have the right person?" "Yes, Ms. Daniels. Catherine was very clear in her will. If you're available, I'd like to meet with you to discuss the details and deliver a letter she wrote for you." A week later, I found myself sitting in the lawyer's office, still half convinced there'd been a mix-up. The office was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. Elizabeth Price, a no-nonsense woman in a tailored suit, handed me the letter with a sympathetic smile. "Catherine wanted you to read this before we proceed," she said. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant but firm, much like I imagined Catherine herself had been. "Dear Sarah, I know this letter might come as a shock. We didn't know each other well, but I've kept an eye on you over the years through family updates and the occasional Christmas card your mother sent me. From what I've seen, you remind me a lot of myself, determined, resilient, and unafraid to forge your own path, even when it's difficult. I made my fortune through hard work and smart investments, and I've spent most of my life alone by choice. I admire your independence and perseverance, especially given the challenges you've faced. It's not easy to stand tall when the world seems determined to knock you down. I hope this inheritance gives you the freedom to live life on your terms. Use it wisely, Sarah, and don't let anyone tell you who you're supposed to be. With admiration and love, Catherine." By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. I didn't know what to feel: gratitude, disbelief, even guilt. I hadn't done anything to deserve this, but Catherine had seen something in me worth rewarding. Elizabeth cleared her throat gently. "We can go over the details whenever you're ready." Over the next few weeks, my life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Catherine's estate included the $10 million in liquid assets, a sprawling ranch in Colorado, and a collection of rare artwork and antiques. I decided to sell the ranch and most of the art, keeping only a few pieces that held sentimental value. With the money, I bought a house in the suburbs, a stunning $1.5 million property with large windows, a beautiful garden, and enough space to finally feel at home. It was more than I'd ever dreamed of, but it wasn't about luxury. It was about stability and freedom. Investing the rest of the money was a daunting task, but I wasn't about to waste Catherine's gift. I hired a financial advisor, a sharp and honest woman named Clara, who helped me create a plan. Together, we diversified the investments into real estate, stocks, and mutual funds. Clara treated me like an equal, walking me through every decision without condescension. She quickly became a trusted confidant. "Remember, Sarah," she said during one of our meetings, "this money is a tool. It can give you freedom, but it can't fix everything. Use it to build the life you want, not the life others expect." Her words stuck with me. For the first time in my life, I felt in control. The shockwaves of my inheritance didn't take long to ripple through the family. Word spread quickly, and it wasn't long before Mom called me. "Sarah," she began, her tone oddly cautious. "I heard about Catherine's will." "Of course you did," I said dryly. "What do you want, Mom?" "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you," she said, though her voice lacked sincerity. "Catherine clearly saw something special in you. I wasn't naive enough to believe she didn't have an ulterior motive. Is there a point to this conversation?" "Well," she hesitated, "I was just thinking, now that you're in a better financial position, maybe you could help out your family. Richard's been having some health issues, and Alex—" "Stop right there," I interrupted. "Richard and Alex made it clear years ago that I'm not part of the family. They don't get to come crawling back now that I have money." She tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. For once, I hung up on her, feeling a strange sense of empowerment. The most surprising reaction came from Noah. He showed up at my doorstep one evening, his hands stuffed in his pockets and an apologetic look on his face. "I just wanted to say I'm happy for you," he said. "You deserve this, Sarah." His sincerity caught me off guard. "Thanks, Noah. That means a lot." "I also wanted to say I'm sorry," he added, his voice heavy with guilt, "for everything Dad and Alex put you through. I didn't see it then, but I do now." Hearing that lifted a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. "You were just a kid, Noah. It wasn't your fault." When news of Catherine's inheritance reached the rest of the family, I knew the peace I'd found wouldn't last long. It started with small hints, subtle inquiries masked as casual conversation. Then, as the details of my windfall became more widely known, the gloves came off, and the entitlement began to rear its ugly head. The first to reach out was Mom. She called one evening, her voice dripping with forced cheerfulness. "Sarah, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you doing, sweetheart?" I rolled my eyes, sensing where this was headed. "I'm fine, Mom. What's up?" "Well, I was just thinking," she began, her tone shifting to something overly saccharine. "It's so wonderful that Catherine thought of you. I always knew she admired your independence." I braced myself for the inevitable. "Thanks, Mom. Is there a reason you're calling?" She hesitated for a moment before diving in. "You know, Richard's been having some health problems lately. The medical bills are piling up, and I thought, since you're in a better financial position now, maybe you could help us out a little. Nothing too big, of course. Just enough to ease the burden." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. "Mom," I said, my voice sharp, "where was this concern when I was struggling to get through high school? Or when I was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on? You and Richard made it clear a long time ago that I wasn't part of your family. That's not fair, Sarah," she protested, but her tone betrayed her guilt. "We've always loved you." I laughed bitterly. "Loved me? You let Richard shove me into a basement and treat me like a stranger in my own home. Don't talk to me about love." She tried to argue, but I hung up before she could finish. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history just because I had money now. Not long after, Richard decided to make his own appeal. He didn't call directly, of course not. Instead, he sent a letter, handwritten in his usual stern, no-nonsense style. "Dear Sarah, I hope this letter finds you well. I've recently heard about the inheritance you received from Catherine, and I wanted to take a moment to congratulate you. She clearly saw the potential in you that I always believed was there. As you know, I've been dealing with some health issues, and the financial strain has been difficult. It would mean a great deal to me if you could see your way to helping with some of the expenses. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but we're still family, and family helps each other in times of need. Best regards, Richard." I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash without a second thought. The nerve of that man. After years of ignoring my existence, now he wanted me to bankroll his life? It was laughable. Alex was next. Unlike Richard, he didn't bother with pleasantries or subtlety. He showed up at my door unannounced one afternoon, wearing his usual cocky smirk. "Hey, sis," he said, leaning casually against the doorframe like we were old friends. "Heard you came into some money. What do you want, Alex?" I asked, not bothering to hide my irritation. "Come on, don't be like that," he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I just thought we could talk, you know? Catch up." I crossed my arms and stared him down. "You're wasting your time. I'm not giving you a dime." His smirk faltered, replaced by a sneer. "Wow, that's cold. After everything we've been through, you're just gonna leave me hanging?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Everything we've been through? You mean the years you spent making my life hell?" "Yeah, I think I'll pass." He muttered something under his breath and stormed off, but I knew that wouldn't be the last I'd hear from him. The real surprise came when distant relatives started coming out of the woodwork, people I barely knew or hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins, great-aunts, second cousins twice removed. They all suddenly remembered I existed and were eager to reconnect. One cousin, Lisa, called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken since we were kids, but she acted like we were lifelong friends. "Sarah, it's so great to hear your voice," she gushed. "I've been meaning to reach out for ages." "Really?" I said, unimpressed. "Funny how you only decided to reach out after I inherited millions of dollars." Her laughter faltered. "Oh, come on. Don't be like that. We're family." "Family?" I shot back. "I don't remember you ever inviting me to anything or checking in on me when I was struggling. Don't pretend this is about anything other than money." She tried to backpedal, but I ended the call before she could dig herself a deeper hole. The most shocking encounter came from someone I hadn't expected. Emily's brother, Brian. I'd always known him as a decent guy, but the news of my inheritance must have brought out his greed. He approached me at a coffee shop one day, his tone overly casual. "Hey, Sarah," he said, sliding into the seat across from me uninvited. "I heard about your windfall. Congratulations." "Thanks," I said warily. "What do you want, Brian?" He chuckled nervously. Straight to the point. "Huh? Look, I was wondering if you'd consider investing in a little business venture I'm working on. It's a sure thing, just needs a bit of capital to get off the ground." I stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious? We've barely spoken in years, and now you want me to fund your business?" "It's not like that," he protested. "I'm just giving you an opportunity to grow your money." "Nice try, Brian. But I'm not interested." He left looking embarrassed, and I was left feeling both angry and sad. It seemed like everyone saw me as a walking ATM now. Eventually, I decided to make my stance clear to everyone. I wrote a public post on social media, something I'd never done before but felt was necessary. To everyone who has reached out to me about my inheritance, I am not a bank, a charity, or a financial savior. For years, many of you ignored me, dismissed me, or treated me like I didn't matter. Now that I have money, you suddenly remember I exist. Let me be clear. I will not be giving handouts to anyone. This money is mine, and I intend to use it to build a better life for myself. If you truly cared about me, you wouldn't need me to say this. Sarah. The backlash was immediate. Mom called, furious. Alex sent me a string of angry texts. Even distant relatives accused me of being selfish. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I wasn't going to let their opinions define me anymore. This inheritance wasn't just money, it was my freedom. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me. I thought I'd seen the worst of my family's greed, but I was wrong. The demands, guilt trips, and manipulative phone calls were only the beginning. When Linda and Richard realized I wasn't going to hand over any of my inheritance willingly, they escalated their efforts in ways I couldn't have imagined. What started as a string of veiled threats turned into outright blackmail and eventually a legal nightmare that would test every ounce of my resolve. The first sign of trouble came in the form of an unmarked envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a typed letter and several grainy photos. The letter was blunt and to the point. Sarah, you think you're so much better than us now that you have money, but you're not. We have proof of what you've done, and if you don't want this going public, you'll share what's rightfully ours. The attached photos were laughable. One showed me walking out of a bar with some coworkers. Another was of me talking to a man outside my house, probably a delivery guy, and a third was of me handing cash to a homeless person. There was nothing incriminating in any of them, but the intent was clear. They wanted to scare me into compliance. I called Clara, my lawyer, as soon as I finished reading the letter. She was the one who had helped me manage my inheritance, and I trusted her judgment completely. "This is amateur hour," she said after I sent her pictures of the letter and photos. "They have nothing. Don't respond and don't engage. If they escalate, we'll handle it." Her calm confidence reassured me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. A week later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer representing Linda and Richard. The letter accused me of manipulating Catherine into leaving me her fortune and claimed I owed them a share of the inheritance as compensation for emotional distress and financial hardship. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was a blatant lie, and the audacity left me seething. Catherine's will had been meticulously drafted, and there was no way they could contest it. Still, the idea of being dragged into a legal battle made my stomach churn. Clara was livid when I showed her the letter. "This is complete nonsense," she said, shaking her head. "They don't have a leg to stand on, but will need to respond formally. Let me handle this." Over the next few weeks, things escalated quickly. Linda and Richard filed an official lawsuit, claiming that Catherine had been coerced into leaving me her estate. They alleged that I had taken advantage of her age and mental state, even though I'd barely had any contact with her before her death. The accusations were absurd, but the stress was overwhelming. Clara brought in another lawyer, Anthony, who specialized in estate disputes. He was sharp, no nonsense, and had an uncanny ability to sniff out lies. Together, they began gathering evidence to dismantle Linda and Richard's claims. "This will is ironclad," Anthony assured me during one of our meetings. Catherine's mental competency was verified by 2 independent doctors when she drafted it. "We also have witnesses who can confirm that she made this decision entirely on her own." Despite his reassurances, I couldn't help but feel anxious. The lawsuit was consuming my life. Every day brought new accusations, more paperwork, and endless meetings with Clara and Anthony. It felt like I was fighting a war on all fronts, and the enemy was relentless. Things took a darker turn when Alex got involved. He started spreading rumors about me online, claiming I'd stolen the inheritance and ruined the family. He even created a fake social media account to post fabricated messages that made it look like I'd been bragging about manipulating Catherine. The posts gained traction, and soon strangers were flooding my inbox with hateful messages. I tried to ignore it, but it was exhausting. For every step forward, it felt like I was being dragged 2 steps back. One evening, as I was reviewing documents with Clara, she suddenly froze, her eyes narrowing at a particular page. "This is interesting," she muttered, pointing to a section of the lawsuit. "They're claiming Catherine promised them money in writing. Do you have any idea what they're talking about?" "No," I said, confused. "Catherine never mentioned anything like that." Anthony leaned over to look at the page. "If they're claiming there's a written agreement, they'll need to produce it in court. Let's see if they're bluffing." Sure enough, a few days later, their lawyer submitted a supposed letter from Catherine that stated her intention to divide her estate among the family. The letter was poorly written, riddled with grammatical errors, and didn't even match Catherine's handwriting. "This is a forgery," Clara said immediately. "And not a very good one." Anthony nodded. "We'll request a handwriting analysis. This will blow up in their faces." The turning point came during the deposition. Clara and Anthony grilled Linda and Richard relentlessly, exposing inconsistencies in their story. Richard claimed Catherine had promised him money during a phone call, but when pressed for details, he couldn't remember the date, time, or any specifics of the conversation. Linda tried to back him up, but her testimony contradicted his in several key areas. Then came the handwriting analysis. The expert confirmed what we already knew. The letter was a forgery. The analysis revealed that the handwriting matched samples of Richard's writing, not Catherine's. When confronted with this evidence, Richard's lawyer visibly paled. It was clear their case was falling apart, but they refused to back down. In the end, the judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they couldn't file it again. Clara and Anthony had not only destroyed their claims, but also filed a counterclaim for defamation and legal fees. The court ordered Linda and Richard to pay a hefty sum in damages, which was poetic justice, considering their greed. The victory was bittersweet. While I was relieved that the ordeal was over, the experience had left me drained and disillusioned. The people who were supposed to be my family had gone to unimaginable lengths to tear me down, and it was hard to reconcile that with the memories of the people they used to be. Still, I refused to let them win. Catherine's gift had given me a new lease on life, and I wasn't going to let their bitterness ruin that. I focused on rebuilding, surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared about me and cutting ties with those who didn't. After the chaos of the lawsuit and the avalanche of family greed, I decided it was time to focus on myself. I'd spent too many years tied to the emotional chains of people who only saw me as a means to an end. Cutting contact wasn't easy. There were moments I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, but I knew I couldn't heal while still tethered to their toxicity. My first step was setting boundaries. I blocked Alex's number after yet another spiteful text and told Mom I wouldn't entertain any discussions about Richard or money. Surprisingly, she didn't fight me on it. Maybe because she sensed I wasn't bluffing. Instead, I poured my energy into the relationships that actually mattered. Emily had been my rock through everything, and I leaned on her now more than ever. We started spending every Friday night together, binging our favorite shows and laughing until we couldn't breathe. Her mom, Mrs. Taylor, still treated me like a second daughter, always checking in and inviting me over for dinner.